WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange charged in a computer hacking conspiracy by the U.S. Justice Department and found guilty of skipping bail by a London court. Assange was literally carried out by British authorities this morning after spending nearly 7 years in London's Ecuadorian embassy. His arrest now paving the way for his possible extradition to the United States, where he faces one count of conspiracy related to the leaking of 740,000 classified military documents back in 2010, provided to him by Army whistleblower Chelsea Manning. Now, just to give you an idea of the scope of this, according to prosecutors, the material that Manning gave WikiLeaks included 90,000 reports from the Afghanistan war, 400,000 from the Iraq war, and 250,000 State Department cables. Now, this led to the conviction of Chelsea Manning, who was sentenced to 35 years in prison, and now Assange could be next. There are a lot of moving parts in the story, so let's highlight how we got here today. The Ecuadorian embassy in London took Assange in back in 2012 when he was facing rape charges in Sweden. Assange consistently denied those allegations, but today the Ecuadorian embassy withdrew his asylum status for what they call, quote, aggressive behavior and violation of protocols. Now, we know that Assange, who considers himself a journalist, was on the U.S. prosecutor's radar since 2010. But it's his role in the 2016 presidential election that made him a quite popular figure. That's when Assange found himself at the center of a number of investigations, leaking classified information, espionage, and collusion with Russia. Here's what happened. Just ahead of the election, WikiLeaks released thousands of emails that were stolen from the Democratic National Committee and Hillary Clinton's campaign chairman, John Podesta. U.S. intelligence officials concluded that those hacks were, in fact, conducted by the Russian government. So the Russians hacked the information. Somehow Julian Assange got it and released it. It wasn't long after that news broke when President Trump showered praise on WikiLeaks multiple times, and he did so many other times leading up to the election.
WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks.
The Hillary Clinton documents released today by WikiLeaks make more clear than ever just how much is at stake in this election. So much corruption.
This WikiLeaks stuff is unbelievable. It tells you the inner heart. You got to read it.
The WikiLeaks documents show how the media conspires and collaborates with Clinton campaign, including giving the questions and answers to Hillary Clinton before a debate. I don't get them. I want them.
We love WikiLeaks. Boy, they have really, WikiLeaks. They have revealed a lot. Podesta said of Hillary, she has bad instincts. Now, we knew that. Just look at her career. In a newly released email, John Podesta has been caught saying, we have to dump all of those emails. Can you believe this? That's WikiLeaks. 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 Now from WikiLeaks.
Did you see what came out over WikiLeaks?
Oh, we love WikiLeaks. We've learned so much from WikiLeaks. 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 WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks just came out with lots of really unbelievable things.
WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks.
WikiLeaks. WikiLeaks. Again, nobody's covering WikiLeaks.
Quite a different tune from President Trump a few minutes ago, who said, I know nothing about WikiLeaks. It's not my thing. Joining me now, NBC News investigations reporter Tom Winter and NBC News senior international correspondent Keir Simmons. Tom, let me just start with you. Most people associate or got to know Julian Assange because of the email leaks, associating him now with the 2016 election. But this is about stuff that happened in 2010. This was the Chelsea Manning information that was about, in many cases, military movements and things like that. And this is why people are of two minds on Julian Assange. Some think he's a hero for being able to get information that governments keep from you, and others say that he imperiled men and women who are at war.
Exactly. So these are two clear distinctions. WikiLeaks really first rose to prominence back in that period that you suggested, back in the 2010-2011 timeframe, when Chelsea Manning stole several thousand, tens of thousands of documents. They were provided to WikiLeaks and they were published. Some of those documents were classified, some were confidential. They included a significant amount of documents having to do with State Department cables, basically information different embassies around the world transmit back to the State Department here here in the U.S.
Supposedly
US
secure.
Supposedly secure. All of that information became public. And then, of course, you've already highlighted in everything the president has said, and also in when you were explaining before, everything that's happened more recently. But the key thing here today is the charges do not have to do with anything related to actually publishing that information, because this news organization and many news organizations publish classified material. It's something that's protected by the First Amendment and a Supreme Court decision back from 1971 in the New York Times versus the United States. So we are allowed to publish that information. What we are not allowed to do, and this is where Julian Assange got into trouble today, if the allegations are to be believed that have been brought by the Justice Department, which is that you are not allowed to help instruct, you are not allowed to try to help somebody defeat security systems. That's really the key thing here today. He's charged with a conspiracy, a computer intrusion charge here today, essentially saying, look, we're charging Assange with trying to help Chelsea Manning defeat a password so that Chelsea would then be able to go through the systems and log in as an administrator or log in as a different user to kind of try to help shield her efforts to get these documents. And so that's what he's been charged with today, not publishing the documents. And the indictment makes it very clear the documents had already been either published or had already been transmitted from Chelsea Manning to Julian Assange. This was for future document efforts, so they're not charging with
important distinction, because as you read through these editorials and news reports about this today, there will a First Amendment and a freedom of speech and a journalism freedom conversation will come to the fore, and we're going to have that more fully probably tomorrow. But today there's a lot of news to get through, so I want to get through that. Keir Simmons, I want to go back to this weird optics. This was a guy who was wanted on an arrest warrant, was given asylum by a country, and normally when we think of asylum, we think of somebody going to that country. But Julian Assange never left London. Yeah. He walked into the Ecuadorian embassy. Tell me about all of this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And to your point, what we're going to see in the days ahead are two trials, actually, in a sense. There's going to be the legal courts that Julian Assange will pass through, and then there's going to be the court of public opinion. Right. And what you rightly set out is that actually people who've gone through a journey in terms of whether they support him or don't support him from different sides, the right and the left, because depending on what he's leaked. In fact, he was in that embassy because he skipped bail over allegations that he was involved in rape in Sweden. Those charges got dropped, and that's why he was still there, is because he knew if he walked out, he'd be released. Now, what WikiLeaks and Julian Assange have always said is the big story here is that they want to extradite me to America. Right. They said that year in, year out, and so what they're saying now, and you heard it outside the court in London, what they're saying now is, told you so, you see, this was always about the Americans trying to get hold of me. And what they'll say now, and this goes back to where public opinion and the legal come together, what they'll say now is, it doesn't matter what the DOJ says, which Tom has really brilliantly set out, it doesn't matter. Actually, this is about America trying to get me to America, and then they'll throw a whole bunch of other charges at me, and this is about journalism, and this is about actually the US establishment, the US security establishment trying to punish me for embarrassing them.
Why did the Ecuadorians decide that this was over for them?
There's been a change of government in Ecuador. It depends who you ask as well. You know, I mean, there are suggestions, or there were suggestions from supporters of Julian Assange that they've been under pressure from the White House to take this kind of action. Also, you know, when you invite someone into your house to try and help them, and then they stay for 8 years, right?
That could be part of it. To the extent that Julian Assange and his supporters continue to say he is a journalist, from a legal perspective, that doesn't protect him anymore. It just gets him into a conversation about whether these things should be protected and whether governments should be prosecuting people for leaking information.
Well, precisely correct, and that's the correct question. There would be no difference between Julian Assange, Tom Winter, Keir Simmons, any other journalist here in this news organization. If somebody came to me and said, Tom, I have classified documents, it's about a secret war program the United States is involved with, but I need help breaking the password. Or, Tom, I need you to help push me into the window to go into the file cabinet and steal it. Those are maybe somewhat silly examples, but that's essentially what we're talking about here. That would be wrong for me to do. If it's somebody...
illegal, let's be clear.
It would be illegal.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it would be illegal for me to do at that point, because at that point I'm coercing or I'm helping to assist. I'm involved in the illegal act of obtaining those documents. Right. What is not illegal, what is protected, is if somebody comes to me and says, Tom, I've got all these classified documents, Here you go, and that's it. I haven't instructed that person. I haven't told them to do anything. At that point, I haven't aided them exactly. At that point, it's clean and it's clear. It's why no journalist was charged with the Snowden documents. For instance, there were journalists from a number of news organizations, including this one, that did a lot of great work on the Snowden documents. No reporter here was charged with that. NBC News hasn't been charged with anything because we were given the documents and then we published them and we reported on them going forward. We did not tell Edward Snowden, hey, go into the NSA computer system. We want document 75. At that point, that's where the illegality question comes into play.
Hey, MSNBC fans, thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on that button down there and click on any of the videos here to watch the latest interviews and highlights. You can get more MSNBC for free every day with our newsletters. Just visit msnbc.com/newsletters to sign up now.